Evening, folks. Welcome back. It's John Pettipas, my second video today, and it's 20 minutes before 5 o'clock in the afternoon on Monday, Labor Day, the 6th day of September, 2021. Listen, I hear lively fiddle music in background, and that's for a reason, because I'm talking the Canadian federal election and Central Nova, which covers some of the Eastern Shore area, part of Guysborough County, all of the fine county of Pictou. There's 3 provincial seats not riding: Pictou West, Pictou Centre, and Pictou East, and all represented by PCs. Remember, they're not Conservative, they're PCs. And they take Antigonish town, the town, and down as far as Lower South River. Okay, just the west side of the South River. So they take anyway the west slice of Antigonish County. Now, the incumbent is Sean Fraser, and I know a fair bit about Intrigues and writing. Okay, they take, of course, Auld McKay was a very fine member for many years. They had Roseanne Skokes, and they take, and then they had Peter McKay, the McKay boy. We have the Trudeau boy, we have the McKay boy. You know, the former executive assistant to a very good member they had in Pictou Senate told me years ago, back in the 80s, she said, "John, my father told me there was a time you couldn't get anybody to run on the Tory ticket in Pictou County." That's hard to believe, but it's a fact. There was a time in Cape Breton that Alan J. McCacken was the only Liberal member, elected member in Cape Breton, in his case as a member of Parliament. There were then 3 members of Parliament, and there were, roughly 10 or so members of the legislature. There was only one elected member on the Liberal name, and that was federally Alan J. McCacken. Okay, was then the riding of Inverness, Richmond. Okay, then it became Cape Breton Highlands Council, which took in Guysborough and Antigonish counties. Anyhow, so at one time Cape Breton was very conservative, okay, voting. It looks like it's certainly the west half of Ireland certainly looks that way in the upcoming federal election. Now, they take, that'd be the seat of Sydney Victoria, but this, I'm going to focus in this one on Central Nova. So, and the lady told me there was a time that her father had told her back in the 40s, late 30s, 40s, you couldn't get anybody to run in the PC Conservative ticket in Pictou County. So things changed. It was a man by the name of McCullough that was a very prominent Liberal member, and it was federally, and he held it. So then Elmer McKay come in the 60s and 70s and in the 80s. And Roseanne Skokes was a very good member. She was on the Liberal side. And then after that, there was one Peter McKay. Actually, I'm certain Roseanne Skokes would have got a second term had Paul Martin, who wasn't much of a brain for politics, stuck her nose in there and put Francis O'Brien. People of the Protestant, Presbyterian, conservative-leaning people of Pictou County were not going to vote for Francis O'Brien, okay, when they, and against a hometown girl from Stellarton. So she could have got a second riding had they not made the merger to counties, and she could have taken and held that seat for a second term, I think. Anyway, that's it. Peter McKay comes in. Of course, Brian Mulrooney came out of that riding. He was elected to the House of Commons through Elmer McKay stepping aside back in spring of 83, in the PC convention, 1983, and then, of course, in 84 election was held, and he went up to run in Quebec. Okay, and they take and Bay Boy, and Elmer came back. So he was a minister and so on. Now, Peter McKay came in once it was post Mulrooney. Mulrooney went down to 2 seats, and 2 seats. That's all the party had was Elsie Wayne and former mayor of St. John, New Brunswick, very successful political lady, and of course John Charest. He went down to 2 seats 2 seats, and so they went back up to about 20, and they merged with us in the Reform Party. I was in the Reform Party executive not riding, but they kicked me off once, and I wasn't surprised. The Tories didn't want to hear people tell them stuff they didn't want to hear, so if you don't want to hear stuff you don't want to hear, you don't speak to John Pettipas and have you an executive. That was fine. Anyway, they take in the Reform Party members. They were fantastic. In fact, one of them is running as independent. There's 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There's 8 running in that riding. Okay, federally. I can't name all the names. The Conservative gentleman is a very decent fellow and he deserves your consideration. He's a very decent guy, and he knows the amount of work that's involved, and a decent guy. Anyway, back to Peter MacKay. Peter MacKay, after saying he would never merge with us in the Reform Party, flipped, and he merged with us in the Reform Party, and of course then the right was no longer divided, and we defeated Liberals. Okay, Prime Minister Harper was there for 2 terms. 2 as minority government, and both strong minorities, and 1 as a majority government. He served the country well for almost 10 years. A 3-term Conservative leader, 3-term successful Conservative mandate. You don't see that much. I think the last one that did that was, if I'm not mistaken, was a ruthless bastard. His name was Robert Laird Borden. He was back in the 1910s, 1920s. Anyway, very successful Prime Minister. Now, it's an interesting relationship between the two. Peter MacKay, I should have a helicopter to illustrate this. Peter MacKay was Minister of Defence. He was over in Newfoundland and he had to come home quickly. So, not like being Minister of Defence and call upon a helicopter, of course. It was a joyride, let's face it. It was a joyride for Peter MacKay. And they said, oh, no, it wasn't that at all. They had to show the minister how the helicopter worked. Okay, well, if you believe that, I got a bridge to sell you in New York. Okay, so it's an interesting relationship between Peter MacKay and Prime Minister Harper. I know we're brother and sister in a certain family. They tolerate one another. Sometimes sisters do that, sometimes brothers do that till mommy dies and daddy dies. Especially if there's money involved. They tolerate one another. So that's about as Christian as I can be to say that Peter MacKay and it's not untold on Prime Minister Harper's part, they tolerated one another. Interestingly, in the spring of late spring, was what, April, almost May, late April of that year of 2015, Peter MacKay announced he wasn't going to run. And of course, when the trend turns, Alan J. didn't run in 84. We pretty well knew the jig was up. He was a wonderful member. He was appointed to the Senate, and he wasn't a do-nothing senator. He was a do-something senator. He was a great guy. But Peter MacKay announced he wasn't going to run, and the feeling is he would have been defeated. Anyway, he went down to Mirkamish, and the present, in fact, the incumbent two-term Liberal member of Parliament for Central Nova, Sean Fraser, a very personable guy. Met him once and sat at a function one time next to his mother, and I said, "Are you El?" And I wasn't noticing to be smart-ass. I said, "You were Sean's wife?" And she smiled, said, "No, John, I'm his mother." She was pretty flattered. And I wasn't being smart-ass. She's a very young-looking lady. And she takes, and anyway, she was the member on Pictou County Council for down around Arisag, or just across the county line, Lismore, misspoke to Arisag. Arisag's on the Guinness County. Lismore is Mary McClellan's McClellan's council seat. Anyway, district. Lismore in Mirkamish in Pictou County, east part of Pictou County, was Sean's mother. And it was some event. It was a fire hall expansion or community event, but they were both there. And interestingly, involuntarily, I wasn't pressured on its own. He said, "I want to acknowledge that my council for your area's son is running on the Liberal ticket." And he added, get this, he added on his own, nobody twisted his arm, he said he'd make a very good member of Parliament for the people. And this is the incumbent Conservative member saying that this lady, whose son was Sean Fraser, by that time denominated, wasn't elected yet, but denominated Liberal, make a good member of Parliament. It goes back to a guy called Fred Delory. And I can't name names, but But the highest up you go in Pictou County, one guy is dead, so I'm not going to name his name, but great guy. He said he was like a friggin' robot, Fred Laurie. Hi, I'm Fred Laurie. I'm the PC candidate. Here's my Conservative candidate. Here's my brochure. Vote for me, please. Boy, didn't congratulate the dog or the cat or the garden or the ladies baking or fella's good job and woodworking it in the steps. The guy said he was like a friggin' robot. Somebody else, who I will not name, a very prominent Conservative, said to me, John, he was a terrible candidate. And so, by the way, Fred Laurie worked in Prime Minister Harper's office, and Laurie Jr. Fred Laurie Sr. wouldn't have done any better, he would have done worse yet. But Fred Laurie Jr. worked in Prime Minister Harper's, and even everybody that's successful got to have a little throws to shit. Somebody makes the spitballs and somebody throws them, kind of shit slinger, little dirt bag, slime bag. Well, such was the case in Prime Minister Harper's office with Fred Laurie, and a little brown paper bag came out, envelope, that leaked that thus they had to have the cover story that Peter MacKay came from Newfoundland in a helicopter. Not because he was fishing over there, had to get home quickly for function. It was a military exercise, and he had to show the minister the helicopter. Maybe not a military exercise, but had to show the minister how the helicopter worked. And so anyway, there was no love lost between Peter MacKay and Fred Laurie Jr. Anyway, Sean Fraser went on to win in that sweep, and the Trudeau sweep of October of 2015, and he's been very personable. Another very prominent Tory in Pictou County was sitting down with a buddy recently in a coffee shop, and they know who they were. They were both die-hard Tories, Conservatives federally, PCs provincially. And he went over and, how you doing? And he shook their hand, but greeted them and made them feel like the only one in the room. And the guy later told me, he said, Sean's going to get re-elected. Now, of course, it's not. So Sean did get elected against the tide in 2019. And he certainly, let's say, his chances, the people decide. It's not for me to make a video and tell the people how to vote. But certainly, Sean is a strong, credible candidate to get re-elected when a lot of incumbent Liberal members of Parliament in Nova Scotia are going to be defeated. I'm going to make that comment. Maybe not a lot, but several. A lot maybe is pushing it too much, but several are going to be defeated. So there's 8 candidates. One of them is a communist. Stay away from the communists. When you vote for the communists that's stealing, you're not only risking, you're probably going to get eternal damnation in hell. You want communists? Eternal damnation in hell. It's wrong, it's sinful, they're evil people. They're like the Taliban and NDP. Evil. They're very face evil in their time. But there's 8, and I can't name them all. I'll try to name the parties. There's the Liberal candidate, incumbent. There's the Conservative candidate, who's a very decent gentleman. There's the NDP candidate. There's a Green candidate. There's a Independent candidate, decent gentleman. There's, I think, a Rhinoceros Party. There's the Communist Party. And there's one I'm missing. There's 8 candidates not writing, so it's quite the ballot. With that, I tell you, get out and vote. The riding is called Central Nova. Back half of Nova Scotia names. So get out and vote. Vote how you please. Get out and vote. And share the video. Promote a discussion. Press the subscribe channel. Share it far and wide. But get out and vote. Get out and vote, my dear friends. And with that, I got to wrap this up. My video's gone on longer than I expected. It's now about 8 minutes before 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and I can smell summer cooking, and I'm hungry. With that, I gotta go. It's a very storied riding, and it'll be one to watch. I'll make the comment, my personal opinion, if Sean Fraser doesn't make in that riding, the Liberals are going to have a very rotten night. Okay? And I said in the last provincial election that if Randy Laura got re-elected in the Antigonish town and west half of the county riding, we're going to go back with 35, 40 seats. There was nowhere else like that. The people took the power away from us. We went down to opposition party with 17 seats from having been in power for 2 terms. Conversely, I said on election night, if we can't win Richmond County, it's every man for himself. And I didn't believe we wouldn't win Richmond County provincial Liberal. I do support the Liberal Party provincially. And we didn't win it. It was a split Tory vote, and still the PCs won it. Okay, so I said, and we didn't win Richmond County. So I will say it's a bellwether seat, and if he takes that seat, he is very personable. Mind you, personality only goes so far in politics when people turn on the party. Okay, that's it, Betty. He is certainly a credible candidate. It's a very competitive race. With that, you fine folks live in riding, decide the race. Thank you very much. All the best. God bless and happy Labor Day to everybody. Thank you. Get out and vote. Bye for now.